Today's episode is sponsored by EditPods. EditPods provide full-service podcast editing that's all in one podcast editing without breaking the bank. Now, one of the biggest problems that I have when running this podcast is the time it takes to edit, clip, upload, and post my podcast in all of the right places with some new artwork, links, descriptions, and all of the jazz that comes along with it. Now, what EditPods do is help podcasters skip all the hassle and focus directly on making the best show possible, freeing our minds to help hone the craft instead of spending time writing copy and doing transcripts and finding links, all of these time-consuming activities. So, EditPods work with podcasters that want to focus their time on areas of excellence and take the rest off their plate. If that sounds good to you, you can use the coupon code CHATTER to get $30 off Basic or Plus, or $50 off of Premium for the first month. That's CHATTER, CHATTER, for $30 or $50 off your first month at EditPods. Make podcasting fun again. So hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I'm here with Gerald Schroeder, who is a former MIT scientist who did his bachelor's, master's and PhD there and then worked 7 years on the staff. He was a member of the United States Atomic Energy Commission and has been the author of numerous books exploring the relationship between science and spirituality. So Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
I'm in Jerusalem at the moment, so it's 10 o'clock at night here.
Yes, I really appreciate you doing this a little bit late. So.
Oh, no, I'm just saying the time difference is amazing.
Well, I'm in the UK, so it's not too different. I'm based out of London, so I'm not quite on the United States. It was a misunderstanding on my part. Yeah, on the time.
That explains your accent.
Yeah, there you go. I'm from Northern Ireland. So God's own country, as we call it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many places have claim to that, but so the reason I invited you on was for your work exploring the combination between and the relationship between science and spirituality. So this is something I've been looking into recently under the encouragement, as I mentioned, of a friend of mine, and the thing that I sort of the first thing I'd like to ask actually is like where did you begin like your exploration of this topic? I'm assuming you had like a Jewish upbringing, so that would the religious aspect of it would have been probably from an early age, and the fact that you studied at MIT suggests that you were also very interested in science from like a fairly young age. But where did you start to explore the relationship between the two?
Well, actually, at home, we were, I would say, Reformed conservative type Jews. We knew we were Orthodox, but we didn't live an Orthodox life. But my grandmother on my mother's side was, and that was probably the link of the dominoes that led to this. What started it, as far as getting things written down on paper, were our kids. I moved to Israel in 1971, and my wife we met here. And we lived for several years between Tel Aviv and Haifa, towards the north of the country. And there are some famous pivotal caves out of Africa, because we're the link. Israel is like a link, and those caves have been peopled by Homo sapiens 150,000, 80,000 years ago. And they're always mentioned and my kids we'd go hiking, climb up them. Now they're quite developed. Those days they were known also, but they weren't like tourist attractions. Now they are. And so questions always arose, about all these people from 40,000, 20,000, and 10,000 years ago. But the Bible says Adam is less than 6,000. And our kids were going to religious grades. In Israel, they have secular and not secular. I don't think there are any secular things really, because living in Israel is enough of a commitment. But they knew more of the Bible then than I knew when I was 4 times their age. So they would ask that, and then one day they came home and said, our teacher said that she had heard that there never were dinosaurs, but we don't believe her. We think there were dinosaurs. Okay, that was enough. So I started putting together notes, writing things down, never thinking. zero thing of publishing, but that's what got it started in doing this. Formerly, what got me into actually looking into these things from a theological point of view was before we made Aliyah. I was still back at MIT, and some wonderful combination, strange but wonderful combination of topics that I'd studied. I was asked to do certain monitoring at the first nuclear explosion bomb test. We never called them bombs, after a 5-year hiatus. So it was amazing because everything was great rush, and I was in Cambridge, that's out there in Nevada, back and forth, etc. And I came back from that test, and I really think the test might have been on Rosh Hashanah, the Biblical New Year, because I came back and I get this note from the rabbi, I heard you this, and this, and I had no contact with him before, zero. And he said, will you give a talk on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which is 10 days after Rosh Hashanah, if you count 9 days after that. And I said, of course I can. What can I talk about? I don't know, and I don't know, A from B. No, it's Aleph from B. And then I said, no, yeah, okay, I'll do it. The whole talk was about the emotional experience of power. Not, we can destroy the world. None of that schmaltzy stuff, just power. And it was, you could have put a monkey up there and it would have been a good talk because it was in everyone's mind. And so the next year they asked me, so next year I couldn't give the same talk. So I figured I had to study it a little bit. Mm-hmm. By the 4th year of studying each Rosh Hashanah, giving that talk, a different talk, I was putting on tefillin. So my suggestion to any Jews that are listening, if you don't want to get in, don't start, in fact, anyone, if you don't want to get involved in theology, don't study the early texts because they're so deep. Once you get by, if you get by cynicism and you look at the depth of the knowledge, it's amazing. And it just draws you in, even from an intellectual point of view, which may be not the right reason to go into it, but that. And so that plus then moving to Israel, the kids asking, and then I won't take your time on your program, but an extraordinary chain of coincidences ended up with, just one domino after another, never relating an editor of an agent rather, shows up at our house and gives us a call, and Barbara says, come have a Friday night meal with us. And she comes, and this is an editor that we'd met years ago. And what every week in Judaism, we read a different part, a few chapters of the Hebrew Bible. The week she called, we were reading Genesis, chapter 1. I gave my little 5-minute talk. Helen Reese, she should rest in peace. I gave my 5-minute talk. The meal finishes. I can see how things stick in your head. They say emotion fixes memories more strongly than non-emotion. She's at the door, leaving. Her hand's on the handle. I'm behind her, going to walk with her a bit. She turns and said, Jerry, what you said tonight is a book. Write it. She pitched it, and amazingly, it was a breakthrough in publishing then. Genesis, the big bang, because Bantam Doubleday, which was the largest publisher in the world at the time, bought it.
Wow. And
everyone, she showed me all the rejection letters. And all the rejection letters said, we don't mix our Bible with our science. Company after company said that. But she was, as an agent, she pushed and pushed. And finally, Michelle Rapkin, a devout Baptist, actually, bought it. And that was the beginning. So sometimes you look at coincidences in the world, and it's sometimes we were off air, and you have 3 or 4 minutes. I'll tell you the whole line.
But just go ahead, man. The show I'd be fascinated to hear what it was. So we're on sabbatical. Okay, I'm now. Barbara and I are living in the States. We have 3 kids. Barbara has to put a few reasons. I can't even help her close down the house. We got a baby that's maybe 6 months old, and we're going on sabbatical. We're closing the house for a year. It's a rented house. Off to the States and we go to Brookline, Massachusetts, where I have a job for the sabbatical at one of the big consulting companies that has an affiliation with MIT. That's how I made. And I'm not at MIT any longer, but I knew these people from before, Arthur D. Little, and I go off, and Barbara's home with the kids. She's got to put the kids in preschool. She goes to a preschool, puts them in, meets
a magnificent woman named Caesar. Caesar, juggling the kids. Come back to my house. Barbara says, "Yeah, you don't want to. I keep kosher." The woman stocks her with, "Well, they go back. They back then." Sarah, referring, and Sarah says, "Let's go to this meeting. We have a conference of editors." Turns out that this woman, Sarah, that saw Barbara juggling the kids at the preschool, is also a writer. My wife is Barbara Sofer. She has a column in Jerusalem Post, has a bunch of books, etc. In fact, one of the books which she co-authored, actually she wrote it, but is being presented to Biden when he comes in 2 days to.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I hope that would be wonderful if he looks at it. Anyway, she's not presenting it. Another a person who about an event. So they go, they meet. Then the sabbatical is over. We go back to the States. A year goes by. Telephone rings. It's the middle of the week. Hi, I'm Helen Reese. You remember me? You met a friend of Sarah. We met at that conference. Oh yeah, Helen, why don't you come? And I realized this the years when we met there. You're back here. Why don't you come for dinner? It's Friday night. Genesis. I give the talk. Write the book. Months go by. I'm alone in the house, and the night before Passover. The night before Passover, you get rid of all the leavened bread. So Barbara and the kids are over at her elderly mother's, my mother-in-law, her mother, the other side of Jerusalem. I'm alone in the house. Helen Reese is on the phone. Jerry, are you sitting down? I said, what's the problem? Bantam Doubleday just bought your book. So that's a nice Passover present. And then one thing led to another. Other editors, other publishers read that and wanted the other books. So, you really, if we hadn't gone on sabbatical, you and I wouldn't be talking today right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of looking at it. So there you go. People should take more sabbaticals. I think is the lesson.
I agree with you 100%.
So one of the things that amazes me about this topic is kind of what you mentioned there, is that it's both the subject can be the subject of a lot of derision, both from scientific and religious groups. And yet, whenever someone addresses it like seriously and explores it like seriously, it seems to become like incredibly popular. I mean, like for example, like the place that I first began looking into these ideas, just of like the sort of maybe like deeper meanings in the Bible than some story that people tell, was some of the lectures that Jordan Peterson had done on the psychological significance of Genesis. And I was stunned when I found out he was doing tours where he was like selling out arenas of people like talking about this. And I was like, what? Like, people don't do that. That doesn't happen. Like, and to me, what it suggests is like, despite maybe people's cynicism, that there's something like very real in what you're talking about. I mean, that's at least what it suggests to me. Like, do you get that sense of that's the reason perhaps why it's been popular?
Well, some of the cynicisms sometimes is directed at a misconception of what this biblical God is all about. Because whether you're talking the Gospels or the Hebrew Bible, there's a major misconception. And with that misconception, I agree with the people. The God they don't believe in, I don't believe in either. What I find is that when you present the information to a person who is interested enough to listen, so they're partway through the door already because they're willing to listen. But if they're interested enough to listen, it's been my experience that almost always they'll go through the door all the way and say there is something. They may not see a totally personal God active in every moment. In fact, many of the major speakers like Maimonides and Nachmanides say that God's interaction is for the group. It's very different from what you learn one learns as a child, when you're wanting to think that you have this immediate. there is this immediate father figure, but the hashgacha, the control sometimes is for, you see this in the Hebrew very clearly, versus group versus individual, placed back and forth. And I can understand a person being reluctant to feel it necessarily at an individual level, but could see it maybe as a group level. On the other hand, when I look at that chain of events that led me to me talking with you right now, I have no idea what made that happen. But Helen Reese did phone out of all the days of the year, right? We're about to give a little word of the Bible about Genesis chapter 1. So
I think what would be useful here possibly would be, so one of the things that the first things that I came across of your work was you discussing how you believe that the time dilation and the stretching factor sort of means that the idea that the earth and everything in it was created in 6 days is not the sort of insane proposition that it seems. Would you mind talking me through that a little bit more? Just because
I mind.
Yeah.
Then someone said to me they could wake me up at 2 a.m. Because it's not that I believe it; it's the fact. It's a fact from the text. It's all text based, and although the calculations are totally mine, the concepts that lead from based on these facts go back. Well, the Tanchum would be 1,800 years. And Nachmanides would be about 800 years. So it's way before dinosaurs were a problem in cavemen. And the whole key is perspective. The key of perspective, in fact, and it's totally based on, from the science point of view, on redshift. First we have to get to the idea that there are two perspectives in the Bible. The Bible says, in 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth. And it gives Genesis chapter 1, goes through the days. But that's from a perspective of the Bible looking forward. How do we know that that's the Bible looking forward? And that's not my idea. Again, Nachmanides, about 800 years ago, but others before him pointed this out. As the Bible numbers the days, because of these 6 days, a bunch of things happen, and then it says, and there's evening and morning, and then the day is numbered. More things happening. So it goes like, so there's evening, morning, day 1. Next day, evening, morning, a second day. Third day, fourth day, fifth day, the 6th day. So the question asked is phenomenally insight. Why does the text say day 1? Why doesn't it say a first day? The Hebrew's explicit on this. The text says this evening, day 1, but it says second, third, fourth, fifth, and 6th. And the phenomenal insight is, well, the Bible couldn't write a first day on the first day, because the only time you write first is when there's already a second. The world wars are the obvious example. Only the pessimists called the First World War during the First World War. Everyone else called it the Great War, the Big War. But when the Second World War became the first. The insight, it's so obvious, but it's overwhelming, because why would it interest a person 800 years ago and before him 400 years earlier? That the Bible is seeing those 6 days from the beginning, looking forward, put it that way. Because if it was seeing from Sinai, you can add, the Bible gives you, why does the Bible give us ages in the first place? Who cares that Adam and Eve live 130 years till they have their third kid, Seth, and Seth lives 105 years for his kid? Who cares about those years? Apparently, the author of the Bible does, because the author wants a calendar, and the calendar proves the validity. So you can add up the years, and by the time you get to Moses on Sinai, hundreds of thousands of second days have gone by. So if the Bible, as given on Sinai, and I'll take it, I don't have a theological problem with that or a miracle problem. The Bible on Sinai, especially after this most recent discovery of this lead tablet. I don't know if you're up on that, but we'll get into that later, but okay, if we have time.
Yeah.
If the view of the 6 days were from Sinai looking back, well, there'd been about 100,000 or 200,000, I forgot the number, thousands of second days. The text would have written, there's a first day. the only time where the text had to write there was day one is from the beginning looking forward. And then that same person points out that although time is created at the creation, the clock doesn't begin until there's matter. Okay, Mishi, Hebrew, anyone who's listening Hebrew, Mishi Yeshit Fosbosman. Once you have solid matter, time is passing, but that transition of about 100,000th of a second from the creation, where the commentators then, I'm not talking about modern, say time is created, time is created at the creation, but it doesn't grab a hold. I mean, there's nothing measuring it. Now, that's pretty interesting, because between that creation and solid matter, all you have is energy. Energy doesn't record time. At the speed of light, as Einstein discovered, time doesn't pass. Time goes by, but there's nothing measuring it. You can't measure time with a light beam, because it would, if you had a clock and a light beam, it would say zero all the time. Mm-hmm. So if we take that, I'm probably getting too deep, but I just want to make it.
No, I'm following. Don't worry.
Okay, from the first forms of matter, which would be, what's the first forms of matter? Protons. Protons are the first step, because electrons don't define matter. Protons, if I say one proton, I'm saying hydrogen. I say 6 protons, I'm saying carbon. 8, I'm saying. So from the energy of protons in the universe at that time, so the energy today, we have a great diagram from NASA. I don't know if you can see this diagram. Does that show up on you?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, so that's a NASA diagram. Every word is NASA. National Space is there. This is the most strong theological statement science will ever be able to make, but I'm not going to get to that right now. But the Bible sees time looking forward from here. This is a time diagram. Each line is 1 billion years. We're out here on the oval. About 14 billion years later, less. And the Bible sees time from here and says 6 24-hour days. Because Adam would be way out here. We're here, 6,000 years, and this would be about that. We look back and we see 14 billion years, just rounding you off. I'll tell you. I said, that's interesting. Lucky, I was in a program. I don't know if you know Pat Robertson. He's the major theological evangelist. In any event, he said, I'm just the lucky one that knows enough Bible and enough Bible and enough science to put these numbers. He said, you're not lucky, you were blessed. Now, and then I suddenly realized after that, blessed doesn't mean like this. It means you got something. I didn't earn my brains. I got them from my parents. And I stumbled into this, but then I realized the Bible's seen from here, day one. That's when I read that, and it just clicked to me. We're looking back. What would it took if I took these 14 billion years and run them back in time to here? Can I possibly do that? And I can. How? Because I know what's called the redshift, the difference in the temperature of the universe here, where it's very, very hot, and here, where it's quite, space is very cold. This is what was so, pardon me for saying that, that ratio, it's a science number. There's zero viable in this calculation. But it just turns out when you divide the 14 billion years by that compression factor, which is exactly what the redshift, what's the jargon is the redshift, it's how much space is stretched, which if you run back in time, it compresses the perception. It compresses, the word is perception of time. Josh, when you run this back in time, so I take that number, divide 14 billion years by that. You can guess what you get. It was scary.
6 days or 7 days.
Six days.
6 days. Wow.
Once you get to Adam, the clock becomes earth-based. It's actually 5.5 days. And it comes out, it's an exact, there's not a Bible number in that calculation. Not one. It's 14 billion years, science data, or 13.7, divided by the redshift. That redshift, I have have a magnificent statement here. I actually printed it out. I just noticed it before the went on the air, and it's by Peebles. His famous book Principles. P.J. Peebles, Principles of Physical Cosmology. It's probably the most important cosmological textbook of a textbook. It's standard procedure. I'm just going to read. A standard procedure to label an epoch of the universe by the expansion factor, the redshift, the ratio of the wavelength as it was emitted to how it's observed. The standard interpretation of the redshift as an effect of the expansion of the universe predicts that the same factor applies to observed rates of occurrence of events. If I paid him to write that key sentence in his book, he couldn't have done it better. And it's not a trick. And that calculation is my second book, The Science of God. In the first book, Genesis, the Big Bang, we talked generally. When I wrote the first book, I had not formulated. In fact, thank goodness I had a wrong idea, and they didn't. Thank God I didn't put my wrong idea into the book. But anyway, that's in the first book I talk generalities. The second book, The Science of God, goes through day by day, and it's all science. So, age of the universe, dinosaurs, Homo sapiens sapiens before Adam, all fine. The switch comes about little bit less than 6,000 years ago, and the British Museum dates it. The British Museum. Oh, where are you?
I'm in London.
Okay, we may be in London. Oh, I'd love to meet you.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Barbara takes every few years. Barbara takes two of our grandchildren when they're returning bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah to London as a trip.
Oh, lovely.
So it'll be later. I have to keep this in mind later in the year. But if you get over to the British Museum, and you go to the Mesopotamian room, there you'll see a plaque on the wall of the first cities. It gives a date. It is essentially the biblical date for Adam. I met the curator. No, I know I spoke with him, but I don't remember if it was by internal phone or being face to face. No mention of Adam, no mention of soul, no mention of Homo sapiens, nothing. The exhibit describes a major change in civilization for which the curator is the British Museum, has no explanation. Not a population explosion, but suddenly large cities appear. I mean, suddenly, we're talking about a 100-year span here. The first large cities, it gives a date. The date matches exactly as if Adam gets this, what's called the neshama. They were Homo sapiens sapiens before Adam, lots of them. But one of them gets everyone has a nefesh, the soul of animal. We have a nefesh, but on top of that, we have a neshama, the soul of human life. All humans have it, and the date is given because you can add up the calendar, and it matches the British Museum's date for the first cities. This is not a joke.
No, it's fascinating.
I hope if you're walking around London, and maybe the exhibit is still on, it's in the Mesopotamian room, and it's called the earliest cities. So that's two ends of the dating. When you have Adam up here, back here we have the 6 days. Josh?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the British Museum to see if they have the gallery up, the thing still open.
Oh.
I don't know if the same one. Anyway, I'll look at that later.
The exhibit is called The Earliest Cities. And it was
I'm just curious. I'm going to have to go have a look at it.
Okay. Anyway, it's really, they say about 3,500 years ago, which is 5,500 years ago, 3,500 BCE, it'll be 5,500 years ago. And Adam is 300 years earlier. The neshama changes, and you have the first cities. But what was amazing is that the curator said, we have no understanding. Why this happen? I said, population? He said, no, it wasn't population. That goes back to farming, back 11,000 years. And once you have farming, populations can grow. You're not hunter-gatherer, you can have more kids, etc. So Again, I didn't mention Adam, soul, neshama, whatever, Bible. Just
there's just scientific numbers. It's mad.
yeah.
It's really, really mad. So
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what you meant when you said that chart is the strongest theological argument that science has ever made.
Oh, Josh, look what this says. This is NASA.
Yeah.
Every word is NASA. This is the creation, quantum fluctuation. Sometime you have a chance, look up the name Ed Tryon, Tryon, who was the first person to say that a quantum fluctuation is probably the origin of the universe. He went to his grave with no praise given to him. It's so sad.
Oh.
But you realize what this is saying? I mean, I want to take the global picture here. This is the creation, burst of energy. Over here, we have our time, the oval. And look what we did. We made this satellite, the MAP satellite, that maps the history of the universe. So what does this diagram say? It says that this is the only physical creation. Make that clear. All of physics holds about this. All Hebrew biblical theology holds by this also. Is one physical creation. Science calls it the Big Bang. The Torah calls it Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz, the opening sentence of the Bible. This burst of energy, which is accepted by the scientific community, can morph and change and morph and change and morph and change and become people that can feel love, joy, cry with wonder, cry with pain, cry with wonder, with love, and build a satellite. You realize it says light beams became alive. That's what this diagram tells you. Science accepts the fact that light beams have within them the potential to feel love, to feel excitement, to feel the joy that you had when you started thinking about some of these things. And it goes through your whole body like electricity suddenly. Light beams can feel love. Where does a light beam have the chutzpah to feel love? That's what this diagram says, because there's no other physical creation. These light beams became you and me. I'm looking at you as the light of the creation in the form of Josh. And you're looking at the light of creationality, but also the chair and everything else, your shirt on your back. Everything is made from that light. Light beams can feel joy. I mean, give it a break. I mean, really, light beams don't have that. But apparently they do have it in them because they did it. So how? That's why I say it's the strongest theological statement it can make, that accepts the fact that however the universe created, within this creation of physical, this totally ethereal. I mean, it took an Einstein to get E equals MC squared. That's the E. The E in the MC squares does not say the E disappears and becomes M. E is energy, M is matter. It means E can change form. Energy can change form and become stuff. Just like steam can become ice, right? It's all H2O. But steam can become liquid, become ice, but it's always H2O. It's always water. And the energy doesn't disappear. It just changes form. And that's what this says. These light beams can morph, change, and become you and me. And by the theological statement is that, first of all, there's a creation from absolute nothing physical. If you have a chance, there's I guess you go to YouTube, Proof of God in 5 minutes. If you look up Proof of God in 5 minutes, Schroeder, okay? Or your listeners also, if they have a chance. You just type it on Google, Proof of God in 5 minutes, Schroeder. It has about, the last time I looked, about 3.5 million views. And website, it's over 5 million if you look at the pilot, pirated set.
Yeah.
And what does it say? It says it looks at the creation and it discovers using this. The entire talk, which lasts 5 minutes and 28 seconds, no script whatsoever. Zeros. Just we did it on 1 foot. Let's make a video. The graphics are great. I didn't do the graphics. I don't know how to do graphics. Make that clear. But it says that a non-physical force, because what does this diagram say? I just described this. A non-physical force that predates our concept of time, which begins with the creation of the universe. My thing is before the universe. Non-physical force that's outside of time as we know it, predates our concept of time, produced the physical universe from nothing physical. Gee, that sounds familiar. Not physical, outside of the time, creates the universe from absolute nothing. Gosh, I thought they used to spell that G-O-D. But it's the laws of nature and God consistent. And the quantum fluctuation is spot on, and that it can do it. First, with the fact that it can do it, thank God, Tryon's brilliance. But God, the biblical God, consistently uses nature when nature can do the job. We come out of Egypt. We're trapped by the. It's called the Red Sea. It really means the Reed. The Hebrew is the Reed Sea. The Yam Sea is the Reed Sea. We're trapped by the Reed Sea. The pursuing Egyptian. I'm not in Egypt right now. We have peace with Egypt, okay? But the Egyptians back then were chasing us. We're trapped by the sea, and God splits the sea, and the people go through. That split. What does God use? A strong Exodus chapter 4:21. God uses a strong east wind. I mean, God needs a strong east wind like a hole in the head. God can split the wind. God can split the wind, the sea anyway. And that splitting the sea was so unimpressive that after the Israelites go through, the Egyptians follow them right on in. It's a wind. You know, those lucky Jews, they got the wind in the banks. What do you, they got everything, you know? So, it's that wind. Why didn't God do something that would impress people? We talk about it now. But the Egyptians weren't impressed by it, because we know that because when the waters are coming back, they try to hightail it out of there, and they're stuck. So the amazing fact is this. I want to show you something. Could a wind split the sea? I don't know how much of that you can see. Can you read any of that?
It says, are there oceanographic explanations for the crossing of the Red Sea?
Yeah.
Correct.
And it's published in the world's leading meteorological journal. The Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society is the AAA, or Aleph Meteorological Journal. And it says you sure can. 40 miles an hour out of the east will split through, depending on the location, the wadis, the riverbeds that focus the wind. It said 40 miles out. It's not even a hurricane. No wonder the Egyptians weren't impressed. It split the sea. So why would God end? You know why? Because the world will always look natural. Till you look below the surface, it all looks natural.
Yeah. You're reminding me of this absolutely fantastic thing that my friend was showing me recently, actually, that there was chariot wheels found at the bottom of the Red Sea at the part where that is suspected that the crossing happened because it's the shallowest part of the sea and has like a nice little place that you would say theoretically it's a land bridge. I mean, it's not quite, because it is also still submerged, but they find Egyptian chariot wheels on this bridge under the water, like where they think people crossed. And I was like, what? Things are blowing my mind a lot, and you are truly blowing my mind with this talk about the creation of the universe. Like I've never heard anyone put it like that, with the way you spoke about light becoming everything. That's like
that's why this diagram is so. I mean, I don't think the publishers of it realized it, but it's such a phenomenal statement. The discovery of how the universe had been created from absolute nothing physical. And quantum, I mean, it's the same physics that allows these machines that we're talking on to work. It's the exact same thing. Quantum physics allows something from nothing in very specific instances, not like every time you walk across the street, but the physics does allow this.
Yeah.
And that's the one of the founders of NASA Robert Jastrow, one of the earliest of the members of one of the founding members. I don't know if I can find my glasses if I still have them. I'm going to check, see if I can find this quote. It's really quite amazing. He wrote this several years ago in the Los Angeles Times. In the beginning, there was a bang and it was a big one. So here, and this is in the small print here, but I wrote it out in text that I could actually read. For the science, this is the closing of this article about the creation of the universe. Okay? For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. And that is one of the founding members of NASA. He's obviously pretty old at this stage.
Yeah.
Robert, Los Angeles Times. Interesting.
Yeah.
Band of theologians who've been saying, I mean, before Hubble found the data that convinced Einstein that creation, we've been talking about a creation for 3,500 years. And a description of the creation, you look at some of the verses, I'm not going to go point by point, but one of the places where it's a statement that God tells Moses to assemble the entire congregation at the door of the tent of the meeting. Okay. Well, there's a couple of million people here. And so a story, it's called a midrash, is developed at this point where Moses and God have an argument. And it's like this. And this is a midrash that goes back to about the year 200, about 1,800 years ago. Midrash goes like this. God says to Moses, gather the entire assembly of the tent. Moses says, what do you want from me already? I didn't want this job. It's, he's forced it down my throat at the burning bush. And I didn't want it then. I don't want it now. I got 600,000 soldiers here. I got another 600. The women aren't kravi. They're not bad. It's 1,200,000. I got people under 20 and people over 50. I got 2 to 3 million people. How do you expect me to get 3 million people at the door of the tent of the meeting? It's all the midrash. This midrash is 18 for me to get 3 million people at the door of the tent of the meeting. I can't do it. And God says back to Moses in this midrash, what I'm about to tell you will astound you. I've seen that nowhere else in any biblical commentary. What I'm about to tell you will astound you. When I created the universe, there's no bigger than the black of your eye, and I spread it out to the regions you see today. Now, why would anyone 1,800 years ago think that the universe could start as a tiny speck? Well, of course, now we know the universe started as a tiny speck and it's expanded out. And it's interesting he uses the black of the eye because the black of the eye changes size. It's very interesting. When it's brightest, it's smallest at the highest energy, and then it gets darker and gets bigger. So that's the Tanchuma.
What book is this in? Sorry, just so I can look it up for my own.
That's in the book of Leviticus. Well, it's a story, but it's in Leviticus. And it's easy to find on Google. Assemble. I can do it right now. Assemble the entire congregation at the door of the tent of the meeting. Let me see. I think it's Leviticus 8. I'm not going to guess it.
No, I can find it. I just want to know so I can go and look it up a bit later. But yeah, if I look for Leviticus, assemble the entire congregation, that I'm sure that will come up later.
Yeah.
But I wanted to sort of turn the conversation a little bit towards a slightly different tact here, because this is a topic that my friend and I talk about a lot, is the idea of objective morality. So this is where my not musings, that's maybe a bit of a strong word, my thoughts about this I first started to debate in my head about it, was this idea of objective morality and whether humans could be moral beings without religion. And this is something that's come up in one of your audiobooks that I'm listening to. What I think it's called What God Says About God. And you make
God according to God.
Yes, God according to God. That's it. And you make this really interesting and quite amusing point about how we believe as humans that like rationality, and were we to cast aside religion, that rationality would emerge, and we would set forth into this golden human age of reason and enlightenment, like the truest expression of what the Enlightenment was meant to have kicked off. And you kind
all evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, and this really amused me when you put it like this, because I've heard like some people interpreting some of what Nietzsche said in the same way, about that God is dead, and that then the 20th century he somewhat predicted that we would oscillate between two extremes of totalitarianism, essentially, as humans struggled to grasp or struggled to give meaning to life without religion. And I was wondering if you'd if there's any would you buy the case that we had to go through that in order to then eventually reach an age of reason, or do you think that this morality has to be set within us from some sort of more divine power?
I think from all the evidence that we have, and remember that I think David Klinker once asked me if I would write a review for I think Consilience. In any event, if you look at the French Revolution, there was an attempt to have total reason. It was complete enlightenment. They devoured their own. I mean, they ate their own people alive, essentially. And if for some reason, I guess because the difficulty is what's moral for you is not so good for me. And what's moral for me is not so good for you, but I don't care because it's moral for me. I think David Wolpe, the rabbi in California, has a book, I think it's the best of all of them, called Why Faith Matters. It's a very small book. And it goes through many of the discussions along this line. But baseline is, it points out all the attempts, the historical attempts in which humans set societies that were religion free, and they became moral free. They became not moral free, in other words, immoral. Well, they wouldn't be but they would not. No, that's not fair to say, because those societies did not consider themselves immoral. They just the conception of what we would call morality would have a totally different definition. And the might is right. That would be moral. That could be in a society. That could be completely moral. That you don't want people to, you don't want these weak people around anyway. Better they should be sterilized. That would be moral for the benefit of society, etc. So I would say, based on, and I'm not overwhelmingly, I guess from the outside it would appear that I'm extremely religious, but I mean, I'm a fairly moderate person. And I would say that all evidence is that if we try to make up morality, then we miss it out. And I heard once Dennis Prager make the statement that if you have the baseline of the 10 Commandments and what they actually mean, from there on, you can have all different ways in which will work. But with those as a baseline, society will probably work with them. So, and I think I would go along with that way. I would be considered an Orthodox Jew, but I'm working now with I call it a mega church for Jews, it's a small congregation. Any church that has 1 million people or so, but I consider a mega church in São Paulo. Mm-hmm. It's all over the world, but it's based in São Paulo. Today we spent 3 hours on Skype. We do it 2 or 3 times a week, writing what we call the Science Bible, trying to understand some of the subtleties within the text, but not only from science, but also social science as well. And I have neither they nor I have any problem with the fact that they are devout Christians and I'm a devout Jew. And in the end, when Jesus said the most important sentence in the world is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," I think it's in Matthew, he was quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. And when he said the next most important sentence is, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself," he was quoting Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. So we have a baseline that's pretty much the same. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the deeper you get, I find, the deeper you get into the subtleties of the text, the more you find a wisdom that exceeds what I would think be the wisdom of a person that in other words, without having some kind of base behind it, the wisdom wouldn't be there. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I've heard that argument made before. So do you don't think that there's any weight to be given to the evolutionary argument that humans developed our sense of morality because of the need for cooperation and what made survival most likely? Like, you think it had to have come from something else, essentially?
Well, in other words, we would get it from need for survival, and then we would clothe it in the idea that God gave it, even if there was no God. Am I hearing you say that, or just?
Yeah, I mean that could definitely be part of it.
Of course, then you're back to religion.
Yeah. I mean,
once you believe that God gave, even if the founding father of that believed that it's just a phony, the people that believe it think that it really. I would say, in theory, absolutely true, because that's why people try it. But in fact, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It didn't work for Marx. It didn't work for Stalin. It didn't work for Mao Zedong, or whatever his name was. It didn't work for Pol Pot, and it didn't work. It didn't work for Hitler, and it didn't. I mean, everyone had their own morality. Those Nazis did not think they were evil.
No.
I don't think they thought they were evil.
No, I wouldn't. Well, maybe some of them, but most of them probably not.
The Jews were vermin or something, or something, God forbid, like that. How many 80 million, or the tens and tens of millions. The numbers are beyond understanding. Like, it's one of the political things I went about morality. They totally remember, it just stuck into my head. So one of these, I was a column in one of the, I think, New York Times, about the person who saw the wounds from these mass shootings. We see television, bang, 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 and he said the bullet goes in. It's not, maybe you get a drop of blood here. He said you should go and view the bodies, the headless children. I had no idea these weapons could do this horrible kinds of stuff. So, and I always, when I was young, I had a rifle, and I was a member of the NRA. And that's the big lobby these days. So, one wonders where, I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but the right to bear on. But I guess, and then the moral things, is there a limit to that right? Are there limits to certain rights? There are limits to free speech. You shouldn't be allowed to go and just to say horrible things about another, and lie. You shouldn't, and knowingly lie. You shouldn't be allowed to. And you can say, well, it's free speech. So I would think there should be, there are limits to freedom. I guess that's the point. That's exactly, of course, that's what morality does. It limits what you can do in the name of morality.
Yeah.
In the name of righteousness, put it that way.
Yeah. So I'd like to go back here, just like, so for the final thing I'd like to ask you about, if you've got time here. You mentioned some deeper some text that the deeper you look into it, the more subtleties and wisdom emerge. I was wondering if you could give me an example.
Okay. How about the opening of the Bible? Reshit bara Elokim et Shema v'Haaretz. Most of this is not mine. I think maybe 99% goes back to commentator Rashi in the year 1090 in my mind, etc. The difficulty with the usual translation, which, the usual translation of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, I'm going to put you on the spot. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Mm.
The difficulty is the word beginning is nowhere in the text. It comes from the mistranslation of the Septuagint, which is about 2,200 years of Hebrew. But it's Hebrew into Greek, and then Greek into Latin, the Vulgate, and then Latin into English. So you got Hebrew into Greek, Greek into Latin. It's like telephone. By the time you get to the end, you can't understand the message.
Yeah.
Difficulty with that translation is the first word of the Bible. Again, this is Rashi, long before dinosaurs, long before quantum physics, long before, Rashi, the year 1090. He's pivotal. Every Hebrew translation, every Hebrew text of the Bible, every Hebrew printing has the Rashi on the side, almost every, has his statements about it. It's not God, but it is a person that's tried to. The difficulty with in the beginning is the first word of the Bible, Bereshit, could mean in the beginning if it were not Bereshit, but Bereshonah. I apologize for giving the Hebrew, but that's the problem. In the beginning is Bereshonah, but the Bible says in the Bereshit, which means in the beginning of. So the text now reads, if you can have a beginning, in the beginning of God created the heavens and the earth. The is not in the text. So, and as he points out, it can't mean this because there's no object. I'm giving you English, but it's identical to the Hebrew.
Yeah.
The T sound, the Bereshit, means like of. Bereshonah, the H sound just means in the beginning. In the beginning of Bereshit, which is what the Bible says, requires an object. And Rashi and everyone else, and everyone, I'll say it, requires an object. But there's no object. Therefore, you have to find another meaning for the first word. And Bereshit is a compound word of Bereshit. Ba with Reshit, from the word Rosh means head. Ba means with the first cause, head cause. God created the heavens and the earth. The rest is simple. So what is the first cause? The other parts of the Bible are like commentaries on the actual text. So Rashi said, if you want to figure out what this means, you have to go to Proverbs, because Proverbs explains it. And he sends us to Proverb 8. And Proverb 8 says, it's a first person proverb. It's I'll give you the who. He sends us verse 22. God made me as the beginning of God's ways. Before there was an earth, I was present. When God created the heavens, I was God's, and I was there. When God created this, I was present. Always says I. You don't know who the I was, because Rashi assumes that by sending us verse 22 and thereafter, will have the sense to read the first 21 verses. And in verse 12, the I identifies itself. I am wisdom, not I am wise, not ani chacham, not ani chachma, ani chachma rather. I am wisdom, not I am wise. I am wisdom. Like I am Jerry. Jerry is speaking here. Wisdom speaking here. I am wisdom. Now you go back. When God made me, when God made the world, I, wisdom, was present. I was the first of God's creation. The first we see in a flow of diagram, the Big Bang creation, energy and matter, or energy. Energy becomes matter. Matter becomes amazingly alive. The life develops a brain. Then the mind is probably separate. But we start with the Big Bang creation of the energy, but the Bible doesn't. It starts with Bereshit. I am wisdom. We have God. The first emanation from God isn't the Big Bang creation. It's wisdom or mind. Science calls it mind today. George Wald, Noble Laureate. He says, it's been a shock to my scientific sensibilities. And Wald starts off his life as an absolute, I would say atheist, lower than closer to atheist, agnostic. Time, chance, does it all. He says it's a shock to my scientific sensibilities, but the only way I can put together the origin of life from non-living matter and the origin of life from non-living matter and the origin of something like a brain in that life from non-living is that mind was the first creation. Eccles says it. Wald says it. Schrodinger says it. Heisenberg said. I mean, I can give you a list of Nobel laureates. They say mind or wisdom is the substrate. But Josh, what this means is that if mind or wisdom or what's the other third? Well, I'll just use mind, okay? Is the substrate. That means everything has mind. I know this sounds very corny. It's a terrible way to end up the program. So you really think it's crazy.
No.
But mind is present everywhere. Mind, it's not like pantheism. In a sense, I guess it is. But there is mind, just like everything that we look around us is energy, is made from the energy of the creation. But that substrate of that energy is wisdom. And the best translation of Genesis chapter 1 is, with a first cause of wisdom, God created the heavens and earth. And the oldest translation that we have into Aramaic, the Septuagint is Greek. Aramaic, which goes back about 1,800 years, the Targum Yerushalmi, is B'chachmata bara Elohim. With wisdom, God created the heavens and the earth. With wisdom. Now, the full translation would have been with the first cause of wisdom, but the Jerusalem translation just jumps in and says, with wisdom. It doesn't mean that God was wise. From the amount of problems, you really question whether God was wise. God probably questioned whether he was wise. But why? But wisdom and mind is the substrate. It's bizarre. I can say it. It's hard to I can't wrap my mind around it. But everything has an aspect of mind. Some aspects of this creation can express the mind into we can understand, and some can't. So there's a commentary, in the text, when Cain murders Abel, God confronts Cain and says, your brother's bloods cried to me from the earth. Brothers' bloods can cry? See, you could actually, if you take that original understanding that there's a wisdom, then the bloods somehow might communicate. I have no idea what it means in physical terms, but it certainly opens the door for the fact that if this is the case, then that we do have, which I feel absolutely certain, and there's no time to discuss it tonight, that we have a mind that is separate from the body. To prove it, but quantum physics opens the realm in which the mind may sit, namely a non-physical realm. Because quantum physics has a non-physical aspect to it, in tunneling, in action at distances, several of these things. So anyway, I'm just saying myself over and over again.
No,
you see in the mirror. Hear me, you say this. I usually say the you that makes you, but someone else said it in a better way. The you see in the mirror is not the you that makes you, you.
Yeah.
You see in the mirror is not the you that makes you the you are. That what makes you the you are is your mind. And as Eccles says it in the Self and the Mind, it's a book, he says, the mind uses the brain as an instrument to think. And Schrodinger says the only reason we think that we're in this physical picture is that our bodies and our brain are in the physical picture. And that is the only way of we human. These are Nobel laureates in physics.
Yeah.
And Eccles is a biologist. I mean, they're not like lightweights, They built the machinery that we're using now to talk.
Yeah. Your description of everything being like in mind or something is kind of reminded me of what is his name? Philip Goff, who's a professor at the University of Durham, who's done some work on panpsychism, and it's kind of given me those kind of thoughts. Just anyway.
Tell me, what is
panpsychism? Is let me get up his description of it. The basic commitment is the fundamental the fundamental constituents of reality, all the way down to electrons and quarks, have an incredibly simple form of experience. So that basically, he believes that there's a possibility that everything is conscious in some form. That that
That's
objects.
exactly what.
Yeah.
Maybe he's read Genesis chapter 1.
Maybe.
It sounds very similar to what we were just talking about.
It's why it reminded me of it. I had to look up.
What's his name again? So it'll stick in my head.
Philip Goff.
Can you spell his last name?
Goff. Philip Goff. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he's. I'm hopefully going to have him on the show when he finishes his next book. So I will 100% be asking him about this. So yeah, I'm sure that'll be a fascinating conversation.
If you can have your PR person send me a note when he's going to be on.
Yeah, I definitely will. I 100% will. But anyway, Jerry, I've taken up a lot of your time, and I'm really, really grateful. And I feel like you left it in the perfect way there. The you that you see in the mirror isn't the you that makes you you. That's a beautiful note on which to finish things. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time. I'll put links for all the stuff we've discussed in the description for people, as well as links for some of your books and lectures and stuff that I've been watching. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, my absolute pleasure, and it was a pleasure having a discussion. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the podcast. If you want to leave us a comment, that would be awesome. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review. Until next time, thanks for listening.